They're in awe of you, wondering how you solved what took them decades in a single night. They're in awe of you right now, and they don't even know how to phrase the question they actually want to ask. Not, how did you do it? That's the polite version, the one they'll say out loud. The real question sitting underneath it is closer to, how did you get somewhere in one night that we couldn't reach in 20 years of trying? And nobody wants to ask that version out loud, because asking it means admitting how much time they spent circling something you just walked straight through. Here's what actually happened, without the mystery wrapped around it. You weren't smarter than all of them combined. You didn't stumble into some shortcut nobody else had access to. What happened is simpler and somehow more unsettling. To the people watching, you stopped carrying the assumptions they'd been carrying for decades. They'd been solving the problem inside a box built by everyone who tried before them, a box made of, that's just how it's done. And we already tried that. And if it were possible, someone would have found it by now. You never got handed that box. So you never had to spend years quietly getting out of it before the real work could even start. That's the part they can't say to your face without it sounding like an insult to their own careers. 20 years of expertise, and half of it wasn't solving the problem. It was defending old assumptions from anyone who questioned them. Every meeting where a smarter path got dismissed because it didn't match how things had always been approached. Every fresh idea that got quietly buried under seniority and precedent. That's decades of effort, spent maintaining a frame instead of actually looking at what was inside it. You didn't inherit that frame. You looked at the raw problem the way it actually existed, not the way tradition insisted it had to be understood, and the answer that had been sitting there the whole time simply became visible. People assume expertise always compounds cleanly, that 20 years of experience is strictly better than showing up fresh. Mostly true, but there's a hidden cost nobody accounts for. Experience doesn't just teach you what works, it teaches you what to stop questioning. And somewhere in that process, 100 assumptions get treated as settled facts, filed away, never revisited, because revisiting them feels like starting over, and nobody wants to start over after 2 decades of forward motion. You didn't have 20 years of forward motion to protect. You had one night, and a mind that hadn't yet learned which questions it wasn't supposed to ask. Watch what actually happens in the room when people encounter someone who solves in hours what took them years. First, there's disbelief, the reflexive kind, the that can't be right response. That isn't really about the solution, it's about the identity threat underneath it. If the answer really was that reachable, that means the years of struggle weren't purely about difficulty. Some of that time was spent stuck inside a frame nobody thought to question. That's an uncomfortable thing to sit with, so the first reaction is usually suspicion. They'll look for the trick. They'll assume you got lucky, or copied someone, or missed something obvious that will surface later and prove the old approach was right all along. Then they actually check the work. And the check doesn't reveal a trick. It reveals that the solution holds, that it's sound, that it does exactly what it claims to do, cleanly, without the compensating scaffolding their own attempts always needed. And that's the moment disbelief turns into something quieter and heavier. Awe isn't really admiration in that moment. It's closer to grief, mourning the version of events where all that time really was necessary, and realizing it might not have been. Here's the part worth sitting with, because it's the actual lesson underneath all of this, not just a flattering story about how special you are. Decades of expertise and a single night of clarity aren't actually opposites. They're different tools, good at different things. Expertise is extraordinary at execution, at refining something known, at handling complexity once the shape of the problem is understood. What it's often terrible at is questioning its own foundation. Because foundations feel like bedrock after enough years standing on them, even when they were never as solid as they seemed. Clarity, real clarity, doesn't need decades. It needs an unclouded look at what's actually there, stripped of everything inherited that was never actually load-bearing. You didn't beat them by being better at their game. You beat the frame by refusing to play inside it before you'd even confirmed the frame was correct in the first place. That's not luck. That's not magic. That's the specific, replicable advantage of approaching something without the accumulated weight of every wrong assumption everyone before you agreed not to question anymore. Now think about what this means for you moving forward, because this isn't a one-time fluke you should treat as an accident. This is a pattern about how you actually operate, and it's worth noticing on purpose instead of dismissing as some strange stroke of chance. You default to looking at what's actually in front of you instead of what convention says should be in front of you. That's rare. Most people, even brilliant ones, eventually stop looking directly at problems and start looking at the accepted map of the problem instead, because maps are faster to read than territory. You kept reading the territory, and territory, unlike maps, doesn't lie to you out of habit. This is also why it unsettles people more than it should for something that's ultimately just good problem solving. It's not really about the solution itself. It's about what your ease reveals regarding everyone else's difficulty. If you needed a single night, and they needed decades, the natural next question is, what exactly filled all those decades, if not the actual solving? And the honest answer, uncomfortable as it is that a lot of that time went into protecting positions, defending prior work, and avoiding the vulnerability of admitting an entire field might have been circling the wrong entry point the whole time. Nobody wants to hear that their years of effort were partly spent defending a wrong assumption instead of dismantling it. But watching you solve it in a night makes that uncomfortable possibility very hard to ignore. Here's what you don't owe anyone in this moment, and it matters to say clearly, you don't owe an explanation that makes their decades feel less wasted. You don't owe a modest downplaying of what you did just to protect egos built on longer timelines. You don't need to pretend it was harder than it was, or that you got lucky, or that their years of effort somehow still mattered more than what you actually produced. Humility has its place, but false humility that exists purely to soothe other people's discomfort about their own stuck patterns isn't humility. It's self-erasure dressed up as politeness. Let the solution stand exactly as impressive as it actually is. What you do owe yourself is recognition of the actual skill at work here, because it is a skill, not an accident. The ability to look at a problem without automatically inheriting everyone else's frame around it is one of the rarest capabilities a mind can have. It's why breakthroughs so often come from people slightly outside a field instead of deep inside it. Not because outsiders are smarter, but because insiders have spent years absorbing constraints that were never actually necessary, just familiar. You didn't have those constraints yet, and in the gap where those constraints should have been, the actual shape of the problem was finally visible, so let them be in awe. Let them wonder how a single night outperformed decades of collective effort, because the honest answer isn't flattering to the old approach, and it doesn't need to be. You didn't cheat the process. You skipped the part of the process that was never actually about solving anything, the part where a field spends years convincing itself that the walls of the box are load-bearing. You walked in without that conditioning, looked directly at what was actually there, and the answer that had been available the entire time finally had room to be seen. That's not magic. That's not talent. Nobody else has access to. That's what happens every single time someone refuses to mistake the accumulated habits of an industry for the actual truth of a problem. Decades of expertise builds incredible execution, but sometimes it takes someone standing just outside all of it, seeing the thing plainly, to show everyone what was actually there to find all along.